So, shall we begin on domestic policy? Excellent. All right, we're going to start with inflation. Americans are experiencing inflation at the highest levels in 4 decades, with inflation now at 7%. Energy prices, including gasoline, have gone up as oil and gas production lags behind a return of consumer demand coming out of the pandemic. The revived demand also has led to supply chain disruptions. Truck drivers, seaport slots, and warehouse spaces are in short supply, leading to costly delays and rising shipping rates for goods. Mr. Davis, what are your legislative solutions to bring inflation down and give constituents of CD 32 relief? You have 90 seconds.
It's a great question. So in my campaign, we door knock almost every single day. And this comes up quite a bit, especially with older people on fixed incomes. So I was talking to a military vet a couple of weeks ago who was 80 years old. And he was really kind of quaking in his voice, almost like tearing up from what I could see, talking about how he was having trouble paying his food bill because his food was skyrocketing. Inflation disproportionately affects the middle class. That is what CD 32 is. It's essentially fully the middle class. So why are we going through this? It is because of crazy economic policies that are being deployed by the Biden administration. Like you said, inflation, we're under an inflation rate right now of 7%. If you get paid every 2 weeks, 2 weeks of your paycheck, that's 7%. Last year, you lost effectively 2 of your paychecks to inflation. That is destroying the middle class and the working class. So how do we fix this? We fix this by increasing our productivity. We bring our manufacturing home to heal the hollowing out of the middle class that we have seen across the country. Also, we get our energy back on track. We open up the XL pipeline and we stop playing games with Line 3 and Line 5, the pipelines that feed Canadian oil to our northern states. Thank you very much.
Mr. Davis, one quick question. What industries are you specifically hoping to bring manufacturing back towards, or what verticals do you think that CD 32 is asking for? You have 30 seconds.
So my plan calls for essentially a commission. I'm not a huge fan of commissions, but I think on this, this is the only way. We've got to do a critical manufacturing analysis of everything that's critical to the American economy. If you remember back to COVID, President Xi was playing games with sending over respirators and other key personnel to America because he's like, look, you guys are having problems with COVID, so are we. We're going to keep this equipment in our country. I'm saying we need to do a top-down analysis. Anything that is critical, whether it's medical, whether it's our microchips from Taiwan, we bring that home, and that's about 20 million jobs, and that'll be a tremendous boon to the middle class, not only in 32, but across the country.
Thank you. Mr. Namdar, you have 60 seconds to tell us your legislative solutions to bring inflation down for the constituents of CD 32.
Well, Nathan did a great job, but one thing we have to also do is stop printing money. That's one thing that we have to do. Stop printing money. Stop giving away our own prosperity and jobs overseas. I do know that semiconductor manufacturing here in North Texas is important. We have a big company that does that. We're also a technology hub. We're going to have to incentivize people to go back to work. There's something that's going back to work. I think also to fight inflation, we have to do exactly what you said. I would say pharmaceutical manufacturing is important, making sure that we don't have our PPE crisis happen again, and also look and have an honest conversation about saying, okay, what else can we do to help revitalize innovation in our economy? So I think it's a combination of all those.
Perfect, thank you. And I do want to say, the audience, you are allowed to respond when you agree or disagree. You have that carte blanche. All right, we're going to move on to national debt. As of February 1st, the United States national debt has topped $30 trillion. It's an ominous fiscal milestone for our nation. We have experienced out-of-control spending by both Republicans and Democrats. The New York Times reports the borrowing binge has left the nation with a debt burden so large that the government would need to spend an amount larger than America's entire annual economy in order to pay it off. Mr. Okpa, who is to blame for our debt crisis? And as a member of Congress, what programs and entitlements do you look to cut or specifically sunset in order to get a control on our debt?
Thank you.
Oh, you have 90 seconds.
90 seconds. Our elected officials have become very spineless. They are afraid to admit to what is wrong in the way we spend our money. Everybody in this room is a family. You have a budget. When you are short, you make sacrifices. You say, no, 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 in order to balance your family budget. How come the people we have sent to Washington are not following in that principle? So our spending has gone out of control. If we want to tap this, we have to have a law that said we cannot borrow more than the annual increase. Say 2%. If the inflation is 7%, we'll do a third. So the federal government cannot borrow more than 2% of a specific amount. And then economically, if you do regressional analysis, you can balance your budget. Why are we not using a simple statistical method that allows you to regress, and we do it in our family? You send me over there, I will be speaking about it, because you know what? I know how to balance my budget in my household. My wife sometimes will say, let's go on vacation. I say, honey, not this time. We can do the same thing. Department of Education is $76 billion. We don't need that national educational department. Let the states keep their money, not the federal government.
Thank you. Mr. Day, as a member, who is to blame for our debt crisis? As a member of Congress, what programs and entitlements do you look to cut or specifically sunset in order to manage our national debt?
I'm glad you asked this question. This is one of my hot buttons. A debt of $30 trillion is beyond the pale. When a nation reaches a debt level equal to its yearly GDP, it's hitting a red line. And we're past that red line. We've got to address it now. Three things in particular. One is having Congress people that have the guts to say, okay, the media is clamoring for this program. Frankly, we can't do it. We have to say no. The second is zero-based budgeting, where every department has to go justify their expenses every year, instead of just taking last year's budget and adding 4% to it. The last thing, and this is maybe the most important thing, is right now we have an omnibus budget and they load everything into it. So every year we have this problem, wow, you can't say no to that or the government shuts down. Let's break the budget into department by department. Let's address that. And then it's much easier to say no to some stupid government program instead of saying, okay, the government shuts down tomorrow.
Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Webb, who is to blame for our national debt crisis? And as a member of Congress, what programs and entitlements do you look to cut or specifically sunset in order to get a control on our debt? You have 60 seconds.
So who is to blame is very easy. It's the 435 members of Congress. They haven't passed an actual budget since 2008. They've done nothing but file for continuing resolutions where, what did we spend last year? Yeah, 10% more on top of that. That's fine. We were at $12 trillion when that started. Now we're at 30, 13 years later. So it's the members of Congress that are to blame solely and squarely. What individual programs would I cut? Actually, across the board, every single government program. We have too many bureaucrats in every single level of government. And something I'm intimately familiar with, the military, thank you. We, at the height of the Iraq War, we had 200,000 troops in country. The Department of Defense said that that was an unsustainable amount of people to keep there. What are the other 2.1 million people in the United States military doing if they can't contribute to the fight? Same things happen in the military, it's happened in every other facet of the government. It's grown, it's swollen, more bureaucrats, less effective. Cut the budget across the board, get rid of people across the board. Send people back out into the economy to work and not living off the government dime.
All right, gentlemen, you remember, this is a debate. Y'all don't have to agree with each other. I just want to remind you. We do want to understand the differences of your belief systems. So I appreciate your civility. You can disagree without being disagreeable. So I just want to remind you, we do care about your individual opinions. Thank you thus far. All right, let's talk taxes. The Biden administration is proposing all types of tax increases, from an increase in corporate taxes to a wealth tax to what we are all suffering from, which is the cruelest tax, 7% inflation. This administration's chairwoman of the Fed is also looking to support a global minimum tax agreement. Mr. Namdar, what do you believe is the proper form of taxation that should be implemented across the nation?
Not global minimum tax, I can tell you that. Colin Allred agrees with that sentiment of a global minimum tax. I think that we're a sovereign nation, we're sovereign people, and at the end of the day, that we take care of our own taxes and our own borders and take care of ourselves first. That's what we have to do. And then what we can't do is then look at the Fed, but just, like Mr. Webb alluded to, a lot of times these appointed people and bureaucrats from the Treasury to Secretary of State to everything else, they tell us what's good for us. What we have to do is start looking at what's good for our constituency again. That's the biggest problem I've seen. We've knocked on about, a bunch of doors, over 7,000 doors. Inflation is a part of it, and if you look at our credit scores as well, as a nation, it's not as high as they used to be. We're devaluing our dollars as well. So I don't want to go and jump in there when the dollar is also the gold standard behind our oil industry. There's a battle with international trade, and one thing that we have to do is focus on our own nation's tax rates, bring down inflation. I'm not interested in going overseas and doing a global tax rate, and I don't think anyone else on stage is either. So pretty much that's it, and get it done.
So domestically, Mr. Namdar, just want to clarify, we understand you're not for a global minimum tax. Do you have a tax strategy that you'd like to see or implement in Congress?
Lower taxes. Lower taxes, help the middle class, and also more opportunities. Simple as that.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Webb, the same question goes to you. I will restate the question. You have 60 seconds. What do you believe is the proper form of taxation that should be implemented across the nation?
I would like a flat tax, and that flat being 0. No taxes whatsoever. Thank you. For our first 120 years of our country, we didn't have an income tax in this country, and since we've implemented it, the government has exploded into every facet of our lives. As far as percentage-wise, I couldn't tell you, but the more we can shrink the government, the less they can be in control of our lives, less money they can take out of the economy, the more we can grow organically in this country, the better. So I want the taxes as low as humanly possible. I want the government where you can barely see it and can barely touch your lives in any shape, form, or fashion. So that's my answer.
Mr. Davis, you will also have 60 seconds to answer this question. What do you believe is the proper form of taxation that should be implemented across this nation?
Extremely low taxes, that's what I'm for. So I agree with those gentlemen. But I am for creating a tax incentive structure that's targeted to benefiting the American family. One of my policies is for if you are a family of 4 or more, federal taxes for you and your family are absolved. You pay no taxes at all until your youngest child reaches the age of 18 and goes on, right? We need to incentivize within America pro-American family policies. If you go to my website, nathandavistx.com, every single policy that I have crafted is targeted for the middle class and for the American family. That's what the tax structure should be structured around, is benefiting our middle class and for our hardworking people of Texas 32.
Perfect. Mr. Davis, forgive me, I have a follow-up question. I did not read the in-depth portion of the family plan on your website, so please help clarify for the audience. With millions of families having two children or 4-person family, and not having them pay taxes, what is your proposal for revenue generating into the country?
So I want to incentivize large families because I think it's important to grow strong families. To me, that's the bedrock of the American family, American culture, and the American way of life. And it's actually 4 children. If I said 2, it's actually 4. But for just any families in general, I am for increasing tax credits. It's a pretty detailed, complex strategy and schedule on what your income is versus what your tax credit should be. But in a general theme, our tax credit should be about innovation and for benefiting our families.
Thank you. All right. I have a lot of follow-up questions about that, but for the sake of time, and we have a lot of topics, I'm going to move on. All right, immigration. This is a hot topic across our nation, and I'm sure something you all know about. Last year, our nation saw the devastating effects of bad immigration policy, and that demonstrates a true crisis at our Texas border. We all know you believe in securing the border. Mr. Day, what is your solution to secure the border, and what other solutions do you have to enforce our immigration laws to protect our nation from illegal immigration, human trafficking, and drug smuggling? You will have 90 seconds. I'm happy to repeat the question because it was kind of deep.
No, we've got it. Obviously, President Trump was on the right track with the border wall, finishing the border wall. We've got to do that. We've got to get E-Verify in place. I'm not sure why E-Verify isn't in every single hiring decision. It's insane. I'm in the hiring process, and I don't know why E-Verify isn't all over. And obviously, we've got to stop incentivizing people to waltz across the Rio Grande. I mean, we're flying them around the country at our expense. We're giving them food vouchers at our expense. My gosh, if I lived in Mexico, I'd waltz across the Rio Grande too. So let's stop incentivizing illegal immigration. And yes, it is a crisis. It is a crisis. I'm glad that a lot of candidates have finally woken up that it is a crisis here in Texas, and we've got to address it head on. Thank you.
Mr. Okpa, we'll come to you next. Same question. What is your solution to secure the border? And what other solutions do you have to enforce our immigration laws to protect our nation from illegal immigration, human trafficking, and drug smuggling? You have 60 seconds.
I came to America legally. Legally. My father, who never came to this country, said, I'm not going to let you go to another person's country to violate their law. And I must get a visa. I was denied visa 2 times, and I persisted. And I got it the 3rd time, and I came. America is our home, and nobody wants their home to be broken into. I will be a good champion for immigration in this country, because I'm the only one among these fine gentlemen who took an oath of citizenship to fight for America, to stand up for what America believes in. So when I use that concept, I don't care if anybody from my family, I say, you better not come here illegally because I'm not going to let you come into my home. So we have to do what? The laws that we have to enforce it. The Democrats are using immigration as a sentimental thing to grab votes, and that is destroying our country. We should not let that happen.
Mr. Okpa, I do have a follow-up question. I so appreciate your story. However, I would like for you to detail to the audience what your solutions are from a legislative standpoint, what your solutions are to stop illegal immigration.
First of all, we have to penalize those who have come into America. And then we deny them the right to do what becomes citizens. You can have a permanent residence, but for having violated and broken our law, you will never be a citizen. That's the law we have to do. But If your child is born here, of course they can, but you who broke into our home, we're not going to now let you sit in our bedroom, our living room. So we will deny you that citizenship. You have your green card, you work and you pay taxes, but you will never have that blue passport. That's the legislation I will push for.
Thank you. Mr. Namdar.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, I'll come to you after Mr. Namdar. Mr. Namdar, what is your solution to secure the border? And what other solutions do you have to enforce our immigration laws to protect our nation from illegal immigration, human trafficking, and drug smuggling? You have 60 seconds.
That's a lot in 60 seconds. Okay, so unlike my opponent, Colin Allred, I've actually been to the border. The Texas border, not Ukraine. He just was in Ukraine a little while ago. But anyways, besides the point. So one thing we have to do is we have to have a barrier. And here's the deal. I inherited a broken immigration system. I didn't create it. But we're gonna have tough conversations. I do think it's important that I'm going to label cartels as terrorist organizations, which is what they are. I'm honored to have the endorsements of people that have been at the border, like Victor Avila, other members who've seen it, people that understand the fight. Human trafficking, it's real. Fentanyl, it's real. Things come across our border, it's real. My mom and dad came from Iran. Talk about a country that is no longer what it once was. And they came here, they worked hard, they had 2 kids, and I'm a first generation Texan in America, but I believe in having law and order. We're gonna have our borders, but we're also gonna stay compassionate, but not at the expense of our own citizens. And that's the future of not only our immigration, but our moral standing in the United States. Thank you.
Probably all of you want to answer this question, so I'm going to give each of you, the rest of you, 30 seconds. I want to ask you to highlight your solutions to solving the immigration problem and understanding what you're going to do differently from each other. Thank you. Mr. Webb, you can begin.
The first thing we have to do is secure the border. It's very obvious. The problem is that there's the difference between federal lands and state lands, and there's a big fight between Abbott's people and the federal government about who's going to take care of that. I actually have a solution that can get around both problems. We have 23,000 National Guard members here in Texas who for 2 weeks a year are paid by the federal government basically to sit around and watch PowerPoints. Take those guys, send them down to the border, start building a barrier. I think I filled 70,000 sandbags when I was in Iraq. You guys can fill them too. We can build a border on federal lands with federal money that they've already paid for.
Thank you. That must have been a lot of sand. Good thing you were in the Middle East. I think they have a lot of it. Mr. Day, I will also allow you and Mr. Davis to follow 30 seconds with your solutions on immigration. Thank you.
Along with making it harder to immigrate illegally, we also need to make it easier to immigrate legally. Thank you. Well, my youngest daughter has a friend who applied for her green card when she was 2 years old. She just received it. She's 18. 16 years going through the legal process and probably $40,000 in legal fees. So one possible idea to kick around is, instead of $40,000 in legal fees, can people maybe through, I've got to stop very quickly, can people maybe earn their way through military service instead of paying $40,000 in immigration fees? Just an idea.
Again, solutions. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah. I agree with kind of all of the above. E-Verify, finish the wall. We have materials down at the border that we can easily finish the wall. But I do disagree with the guys up here. I don't think that we need to substantially increase legal immigration. I think we have to reduce legal immigration and totally ban illegal immigration. For 10 years, if you go to my website, that's my policy. We have to be extremely honest about what's going on in the country. Our middle class is being hauled out. We're offshoring jobs. We cannot economically continue to allow millions of people illegally and legally into this country. 100 million people have come to the country legally since the 1965 Immigration Act. We are loving people. I'm just saying, let's reduce immigration for 10 years and let the middle class heal. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to move on.
Rebuttal.
You've already spoken.
Rebuttal.
You will have 15 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Jim. It's also important, we have backlogged visas from a lot of nations too, and we want to bring the best and brightest. My wife was born and raised in Mexico. She came here. She is also precinct chair. She's been an election judge. She became a U.S. citizen in 2016. She's a proud red voter ever since. We want good people in the United States because our strength is our diversity united. I want to make sure that's...
Thank you. I knew all y'all would want to answer that question. Somehow I just knew. We are going to move on. We're going, what?
Respond.
No. All right, gentlemen. And then now it's starting to get exciting. All right. We're going to switch gears a little bit, but we're going to move away from the border, but we're going to stay on crime. Over the last 2 years, crime has swept the United States. 2/3 of America's largest cities have seen even more homicides in 2021 than in 2020, with killings rising in New York from 468 to 485. In Chicago, from 771 to 797. And in Houston, here in Texas, from 400 to 467. More than 13 big cities, including Philadelphia, Austin, and Portland, have set all-time records for homicides in 2021. Mr. Webb, what do you believe is the cause of this violence? And how should Congress solve violent crime and policing to ensure safe communities around the country? You will have 90 seconds.
So who's to blame for this? Who runs every single one of those cities? Which party? Simple solution right there. Get their woke policies out of there. So my dad is a retired state trooper. My stepmom is a Harris County Sheriff's deputy. Come from a long line of law enforcement, and the things that they have to go through on a daily basis is unbelievable. My dad asked me after I got out of the military if I was interested in being a police officer, and I said, no, I left my war over there. I don't want to have to fight one here every day. So what they go through is unbelievable, and these cities, especially these blue cities, are hamstringing the police officers, not letting them do their jobs, which is why you're seeing an increase in crime. The police officers themselves are afraid that they're going to get, lambasted on national media and thrown in jail for simply doing their job. The problem that we have is actually not the individual police officers, it's the police departments. That's the cause of most of the problems we have. Improper training, not giving the proper rules of engagement like we had in the military. You knew exactly when you could use your weapon and when you couldn't. So the solution is better train the police officers and get the Democrats out of the cities.
Feeling Jennifer's working on that. All right, we're going to go to Mr. Day. What do you believe is the cause of this violence, and how should Congress solve violent crime and policing to ensure safe communities around the country?
As Justin said, obviously the Democrats are the problem. Defund the police is the stupidest idea in the history of American politics. So I think Congress can set the tone and also encourage Republicans to be elected in the major cities that are just rife with crime. Did you know that the city of Baltimore has a higher violent crime rate than Somalia right now? Somalia. So the Congress needs to set the tone of law and order, and let's help get Republicans elected in every major city in America.
Follow-up question before we move on. Setting the tone. Legislatively, what does that look like? What policies, what legislation are you currently looking at that you would either sign on to or that you would author? You have 30 seconds.
There are some policing block grants that I think that Congress can fund that will help some local police departments that maybe have been hit by local budget cuts. So there are some block grants that Congress can help with.
Thank you. Mr. Namdar, you'll be also answering this question. What do you believe is the cause of the violence that we have experienced? And how should Congress solve violent crime and policing to ensure safe communities around the country? You have 60 seconds.
So I agree with Mr. Day and everybody. Defund the police, bad idea. It's terrible, but also I'm a constitutional conservative, and that's up to also our states and our municipalities and all that stuff. But I do think from Congress, what we can do is have task force. Allocate appropriations of funds for federal task force to tackle crimes, tackle the pandemic issue was a big reason why we had a rise in crime. People just didn't know what to do. They weren't sure. and we put too much government in their lives. So we have to make sure that we have law and order, we back up our law enforcement, we don't allow anyone to defund our law enforcement, and I think getting our law enforcement involved in schools again is a good idea. Have a neighborhood officer. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, I went to Plano West. We loved our school officers. I think that those things are important for the moral fabric of any constituency and in the United States. And I don't know when we changed. It feels weird, but we're gonna get back to that. We have to respect our law enforcement. That's from Congress. I will not ever advocate for defunding the police, and I will advocate for making sure we do task force to tackle from homelessness issues, mental health, to all the way to crime and hardcore, everything else. But we have to take care of it municipally too.
Thank you. Thank you.